If you are brand new to the Mac, or if you've just never had anyone walk you through the basics, then be sure to stay tuned. My new to Mac class, Catalina Edition, coming up next on Tech Talk America. Hey folks, and welcome to the class. Today I have put together a class to walk you through all of the basics of using a Mac. Now, before we begin, we do have a couple of quick items to go over, but don't worry, I'll keep this part brief. There is a free PDF guide that goes along with this class, which includes a list of all of the most important hotkey combinations, and you're especially going to want to download that if you're coming over to the Mac from a PC. Trust me, it'll help make the transition easier. The link to that guide is down below in the video description. This class took a lot of time to put together and assemble, and I greatly appreciate it if you please not use an ad blocker. Not just when watching my videos, but also anyone here on YouTube. The reality is that this is how I'm able to offer content free to the public. Last item before we begin this class, I love getting to make these videos for all of you, but unfortunately the space where I create all of this content has become increasingly difficult to work in for a variety of reasons. So I've set a goal to move sometime in the next year to a slightly larger space where I can more comfortably create content like this for years to come. So today I'm asking if this or any of my past classes have helped you over the years. I would really appreciate your support, and I invite you to contribute whatever amount you like. As someone who considers himself to be more of a teacher than a YouTube personality, I can tell you that it means a lot more to me that someone cared enough to make a contribution rather than how much they gave. Although there's probably a tipping point at some point. If you'd like to support my channel, you can contribute through Venmo at Tech Talk America. If you prefer PayPal, there is a link down below. Or if you'd like to send a good old-fashioned check in the mail, the P.O. Box address is right there. It's also listed down below in the video description. Thank you for allowing me to do what I do for a living, and without any further ado, let's begin the class and switch to my Mac. I always like to start my new to Mac class by going over the basics of navigation, starting with Finder. Now, despite the fact that it currently says Finder here at the top left of my screen, please know that Finder is actually this happy and quite content little Mac icon here at the bottom left. Clicking on Finder will open what we call a Finder window, which will allow you to navigate to different locations on your computer, like your Documents folder, Downloads folder, Applications, etc. Usually when I'm working with clients of mine who are brand new to the Mac, one of the first things I like to do is help them customize what locations appear here on the sidebar. To do this, let's actually click where it does say Finder here at the top left, and let's click on where it says Preferences. Here under the General tab, I tend to recommend that you change this option to whatever location you need access to the most. And in my experience, for most people, that's either the Documents folder or the Downloads folder. Now, let's switch over to the Sidebar tab here at the top. Starting at the top of the list, I have checked the boxes next to Recent Files, which can be really handy anytime you're trying to find something that you either recently downloaded or created. The next option here is called AirDrop, which I absolutely love. This feature is perfect anytime you want to share anything from your iPhone, iPad, or Mac with someone else's iPhone, iPad, or Mac. That is, if they are physically with you. It's perfect for photos, videos, etc. The next option is for Applications, followed by Downloads. You can comfortably leave out these next few options, for most people that is. We're going to check the box next to this house icon, which is called your Home folder. It'll have your name on it. The next three items that you see will only be here in this group if you are signed into iCloud and if you have enabled iCloud Drive, which I do recommend. As we get towards the bottom of this list, you can now see the three items that I do have checked. Those are just really handy if you ever need access to them, and I'm going to leave the rest of these unchecked. I'm going to close this window by clicking the little red dot that you see at the top left of this window. By the way, on most windows you will notice a red, yellow, and green dot at the top left. The red dot will close a window. The yellow dot will minimize it down here into the dock, which we will talk about momentarily. And the green dot can actually do a few different things. If you click it once, it will take you into full screen mode, which I use all the time. However, if you hover your cursor over the green button, you will see a few other options appear, including split screen view, where you can then click on that and another application in order to use them side by side, Or if you have an iPad, you can now use a new feature called Sidecar to use your iPad as a second monitor. The only reason why my iPad isn't showing up is because I currently have my iPad connected to a different Apple ID, so that's why it doesn't show up there. There is actually one other little Finder window related preference that I want to recommend that you enable. And to set this up, you'll need to open a Finder window, once again by clicking on that little Happy Mac icon. From here, I'm going to go to the very top of the screen where it says View, and the two settings are right next to each other. They are Show Path Bar and Show Status Bar. So now that I have those both enabled, if you look here at the bottom of the Finder window, for one, I can now clearly see how much free space I have on my Mac, which is always a good idea to know. And we can also see very clearly where in the computer we currently are. Let's now talk for a moment about this bar of icons that you see at the bottom of my screen. This is what we refer to as the dock. You can customize your dock so that it contains shortcuts to all of the applications, also known as apps, that you frequently use, like for example the Photos app, the Mail app, and the brand new Podcast app. So let's say there is an app that you want to add to your dock that you currently don't see listed. If you already have it downloaded, whether from the App Store or the web, at this point you'll just need to open up a Finder window and then click where it says Applications. So for example, if I want to add the app Malware to my dock, I can just click and drag the icon from the Applications folder and drop it onto my dock, and it will stick there. Now, if there are apps on your dock that you don't use, that you would like to remove, there's a couple of different ways that you can remove them. The easiest is you can just click and drag it off of the dock and drag it towards the top part of your screen. Once you get to around 2/3 of the way up, you should see the word Remove appear, and at that point, if you just let go of your cursor, it disappears. The last item here at the end of your dock is the trash can. This is where you can drag and drop files once you're done with them. You can have your trash empty manually or automatically. If you want to do it manually, just click into it and you'll see the button to empty it here at the top right. Or if you want this to happen automatically, here's how you do that. You'll first need to go to the Apple icon at the top left and then go into where it says About This Mac. Then you'll need to click the Storage tab, followed by the Manage button here on the right-hand side. And on this next window, you'll see the option to have it empty automatically right here. At this point, I want to start to walk you through a part of the Mac known as System Preferences, which is where you can really customize your Mac. Now, I've done this with a lot of clients over the years, and so what I would like to do is explain only the most important preferences, and I'm also going to show you a few settings that you might want to consider changing away from their default settings just to make it a little bit easier for you to use. So let's click on the Apple icon here at the top left of the screen, and then let's click where it says System Preferences. Let's start by clicking here where it says Apple ID. Now, even I have to admit that there is a lot of terminology in Apple's ecosystem that a lot of people find confusing, and I tend to agree. So, for example, a lot of people get confused about the difference between an Apple ID and iCloud. So let's go through those, starting with your Apple ID. Your Apple ID is the email address and password that you use to access Apple's services, like the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, iMessages, FaceTime, and more. It also contains the contact, payment, and security details that you will use to sync across your Apple devices. iCloud is a service that stores and synchronizes your stuff, which includes your photos, files, reminders, calendars, and notes with all of your other Apple devices. It's hard for me to make a general recommendation to everyone about what settings to use and not use because, frankly, there are plenty of exceptions to the rule. But that being said, here is my argument for why I think it is a good idea to use most of these features. One of the things that we are going to discuss a little bit later in this class is the importance of backing up your data so that if your hard drive fails, or if you had a fire or a flood, or if suddenly you had to evacuate your home, you want to have a way to get back your data, even if every electronic you owned were destroyed. And the nice thing about iCloud is that as long as you have everything set up correctly, you could literally buy a brand new computer, sign in with your Apple ID and iCloud information, and everything comes back. So by keeping everything under one umbrella, you only have one place that you need to go. Now, there is one exception to the rule, which is that personally, I don't recommend that my clients use Keychain. If you're not familiar with this, Keychain is the ability to synchronize your passwords from device to device. Now, some people may disagree with this recommendation, but the reality is that the Keychain app is literally the only app that has never received a makeover. And for the average human being, it's pretty difficult to navigate. So if you want to sync your passwords, I'm just going to give a quick plug to another video of mine, which is all about this app called LastPass. If you want to watch it, there's a link down below. And if you decide to go with a different solution, that's fine too. I just encourage everyone to have some sort of a solution for their passwords that is a little bit more evolved than a notebook of scribbled passwords. Let's now go back to the main system preferences page, which we can do by clicking this icon right here. Next, let's go into General Settings, and one of the new features found in Mac OS Catalina is that your Mac can now automatically switch from light mode into dark mode after the sun sets. I think this automatic feature is great, just because if you're getting ready for bed, the lack of those super bright white images makes it easier for your brain to shut down at the end of the day. If your vision isn't what it used to be, and unfortunately yours truly is rapidly approaching that point, there are several things that you can do to make the text appear bigger on your screen. I will go over many of those settings momentarily. This one here is pretty simple. It just makes it so that when you open up a Finder window, the items that you see on that left-hand side are a little bit bigger. So adjust that as necessary. Another option I wanted to point out is the ability to add back the scroll bars. So if you're not used to using touch gestures on a trackpad or a mouse, this can be a good option. The next item here is to change the default web browser. Now, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of Safari, so I decided to change my default browser to Google Chrome. Next, let's go briefly here into Desktop and Screensaver. One of the new features in Mac OS Catalina are these new dynamic desktops. These images will change over the course of the day to show sun rising and setting. Once again, this feature is just to help make it a little bit easier for you to get some sleep at the end of the day. We're going to skip over screensavers only because these days there really isn't a need to have a screensaver. You're frankly much better off putting your computer to sleep, and we'll cover that once we get into the energy saver preferences. The next preference pane that we're going to go into is notifications. Just last week, I was helping my parents with their computer, and one of the things that I noticed was they were getting bombarded by these pop-up notifications. And this is how I fixed it and why it's in this class. So if there is ever an app that is just spamming you to death with notifications, usually a web browser, you can just find it here in this list and turn it off. The next item here is internet accounts. So if you have something like Gmail, Yahoo, or some other type of internet account, this is where you can enter in that information so that it will be saved inside of your computer. This is also how you can add your email address so that it works with the Apple Mail program, which I do highly recommend. Users and groups is a great solution for households where several people use the same computer. By creating different user accounts for each person, everyone can have their own separate space to do their own thing. One of the things that I wanted to point out is this little lock icon that you see here at the bottom left. You will occasionally see this on some preference windows, which just indicates that in order to make any changes, you'll first need to click that lock and enter in the master password in order to make those changes. We're not going to go over accessibility options in this class, but I did want to mention that if you or anyone you know is living with paralysis or one of the various medical conditions that affect motor control, like Parkinson's or MS, I do have a class that I recently produced which is on a feature known as voice control, which allows you to entirely control your Mac using only your voice. If you ever want to check out that class, I'll put a link in the video description. Moving on, let's now go into security and privacy. One of the preferences that I always like to warn people about is called File Vault. There are very few times when Apple and I significantly disagree on something, and this is one of them. Now, this feature is great if you are a high-profile individual, and I have plenty of clients who do fall into that category. But if you're just a normal human being, you probably should consider not using this feature. What File Vault does is it encrypts all of your data. So think of this as the digital equivalent of wearing a 50-pound bulletproof vest while trying to do your normal day-to-day activities. While it might make you quote-unquote more secure, it's also going to slow down virtually everything you do. So if you do go into this pane and it says turn off File Vault, that would imply it's currently turned on. So if you're wondering why your Mac is running super slow to do anything, that's the reason why. Just be aware that if you do disable File Vault, it means that your computer is going to decrypt all of your data. And that process can take a while, so you might want to consider doing it overnight. Let's now go over to the Privacy tab, and I just wanted to point out a couple of quick items here. First, for those of you who do have security concerns, it's not a bad idea to occasionally go through some of the items that you see in this list, and if you see any apps listed here that you don't recognize, you might want to uncheck them. Once again, in order to make changes, you will first need to click that little lock icon at the bottom left and enter your master password. One more thing on the topic of security. There is one and only one security app that I recommend across the board to every single one of my clients, regardless of how they use their computer, where they live in the world, or what they do for a living. And that app is Malwarebytes. This software protects you not only from malware, but adware, ransomware, fake websites, and a lot more. Best of all, it's easy to use and it runs automatically. Now, in the interest of transparency, I am an affiliate of Malwarebytes and they are sponsoring this video, which I thank them for. But that being said, I've been recommending these guys for years. And my policy is I only accept sponsorships from businesses that I actually believe in. Now, if you don't currently have Malwarebytes on your Mac, there is a link to get it down in the video description. You'll find it on my computer, and even more telling, you'll find it on my parents' computer. The next item is software update. And over the last few years, I've had to change my recommendation on this feature. So here's the thing. In general, it's a good idea to run software updates. But the exception to the rule is anytime Apple releases a new version of their operating system. So, for example, when it went from Mac OS Mojave to Mac OS Catalina. While I know it can be tempting to download a new operating system the day it comes out, the reality is that many times there are bugs that need to be worked out, and that takes time. So my rule of thumb is to usually try to wait 2 months after a new operating system has been initially released. I'd also advise you to only upgrade to the latest operating system if your computer was manufactured in the last 4 or so years. Newer operating systems require more resources, so as a computer ages, it will most likely have trouble keeping up with those changes, and the result is things tend to slow down. I'm not saying you need to get a new computer, I'm just advising that maybe you consider sticking where you're at. One of the areas that is so much easier on a Mac compared to a PC is when it comes to adding a printer or scanner. Just go into this option, connect the printer to your Mac, turn it on, click the plus button that you see right here, and that's pretty much it. If your printer is wireless, there may be a couple of other steps, but those are usually all done on the printer itself. One very quick bullet point on the topic of printers, there is a lot of junk out there. That's reality. If you ever need a recommendation for a new printer, I want you to know that there is a page on my website called Product Recommendations. And yes, there's a page dedicated to printers. The next item I'd like to show you is actually a really nice time-saving trick. Let's go into Keyboard Preferences, and here at the top, we're going to click where it says Text at the very top. This feature is perfect for anyone who has to constantly write the same things over and over again. For example, things like driving directions. I know plenty of people who send little cute birthday wishes that use emojis. If you have to answer customer support questions and get the same kinds of questions over and over again. Here we have 2 columns, one called Replace and the other called With. So here in this left column is where we will create what I have come to refer to as a trigger phrase. So when I type these letters onto my keyboard, it is going to replace those with whatever I want. The key to creating a successful trigger phrase is you want it to not be a series of letters that you would normally use in a row. Otherwise, you could accidentally trigger it all the time. Which, by the way, could be a really funny practical joke. Last thing while we're still here in Keyboard Preferences, I'd also recommend that you check out the Dictation tab. This, of course, allows you to speak into your microphone and it will attempt to translate it. I found this feature to be a great way to initially get an idea out of my head, and then I usually go through and correct any errors. The next preference that we're going to cover is trackpad preferences. Now, obviously, you can skip this part if you're using a mouse, but this is one of the big items on my list in terms of things I like to make sure that people who are new to the Mac fully understand. Using a combination of gestures on your trackpad, you can make your Mac do different things. And what I'm going to do is show you exactly what I recommend to my clients. So if you're following along at home, I welcome you to mirror my settings. If you look at the top, we have 3 tabs, and let's start with the point and click options. Now, you'll notice that as I move my cursor over each of these options, a little animation is playing alongside it to the right-hand side to demonstrate the gesture. I don't find that a lot of people use this first gesture, so I have lookup and data detectors turned off. The second, however, is critical. For those of you who have come over to the Mac from the PC world, you are probably used to having a left and right click. For whatever reason, probably just to make life more difficult, on a Mac, this is referred to as a primary click and a secondary click. So for example, whenever you want to pull up any additional options, this is where this feature would normally come in handy. Personally, I like to make it so that when I click with 2 fingers present on my trackpad, that is what triggers a secondary click. But if you prefer, you can also make it so that that happens whenever you click in a specific corner. I just want you to know what I mean whenever I say the term secondary click. Some people like the tap to click feature, others don't. For me, I find that I use this feature more on my laptop, but not so much on my desktop. So choose whatever feels right to you. Here we can adjust how much pressure triggers a click, as well as the tracking speed. I also wanted to acknowledge that depending on whether you're on a laptop or a desktop using the Magic Trackpad, some of these options may look a little bit different. Let's now move over to the next tab, and here you can see I have the first 2 options enabled and the last 2 disabled. This first option is for scroll direction. So for example, when I launch a website that is more than 1 page, I can just simply swipe with 2 fingers up and down to make that web page scroll. The zoom in feature doesn't work for every application, but if you ever need to zoom in on something, again, like a website, you can use this gesture, which is the same as you would use on an iPhone or an iPad. If we move over to more gestures, you can see that I have 3 of these features enabled. The first is to swipe between pages. So once again, if you're on the web and you want to go back a page, instead of having to click the arrow at the top, you can just swipe on your trackpad from left to right, and the reverse if you want to go ahead a page. The next feature is to swipe back and forth between full screen apps. For now, I would recommend that you enable this feature, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more later on. And finally, we have Launchpad. With this feature, I can start with 4 fingers extended and then pinch them inward. By the way, Launchpad is also the same as this little spaceship icon that you see here at the bottom of my screen. It basically is just another way to get into the Applications folder that makes it look a little bit like an iPad. So now, for example, if I wanted to go to page 2 of my apps, I would just need to swipe with 2 fingers left and right to navigate between those pages. And by the way, if you ever want to exit Launchpad, you can just click anywhere that you don't see an app. Let's next go into display settings. If you have trouble with your vision, this is definitely something that you're going to want to explore. Just know that if you change this option from default for display to scaled, this will make everything bigger, but as a result, it will also lower the resolution a little bit so that images may not appear as high definition as they actually are. I'd also encourage you to go here into night shift settings and set this from sunrise to sunset. That way, after the sun goes down, it will automatically shift the colors so that the images are warmer, making it easier for your brain to shut down at the end of the day. That being said, there is one exception to the rule. I don't recommend using this feature if you are a photographer or video editor, and specifically if you work at night. One time I stayed up late color correcting one of my droning Provincetown videos, not realizing this feature was turned on, which meant recolor correcting everything the next day. The next option is a brand new feature in Mac OS Catalina called Sidecar, and this basically allows you to use your iPad as a second monitor. It's not for everyone, but it's a really good feature to know about. As I mentioned earlier, instead of using a screensaver, you're a lot better off to have your Mac just simply turn off the display after a period of time. One quick side note, if you have a desktop as opposed to a laptop, one little accessory that I do highly recommend is to have some sort of a battery backup, especially if you live in a part of the world where you get a lot of brownouts or blackouts during certain times of the year. You don't really need anything too crazy. This device is not meant to be used like a generator. It's really just so that if the power does go out, you have an adequate amount of time to properly shut down your computer. Next, I want to talk briefly about Time Machine. This is a feature where your Mac can automatically back up to something like an external hard drive. Now, backing up your data is something that you should take seriously. I'm telling you right now that data recovery is one of those life lessons that you don't want to learn the hard way. At this point, I like to recommend that my clients have both a cloud backup solution like iCloud or Dropbox, as well as a backup on a physical hard drive using Time Machine. Now, the good news is that the cost of external hard drives has come way down over the last few years. You really don't need anything overly special for a backup. Just make sure you get one with a big enough capacity and one that comes with the connections that fit your computer. I don't want to waste any more time talking about external hard drives, so if you do need a local backup, I have plenty listed on my website on that product recommendations page. At this point, I want to show you how to run apps in both full screen mode and split screen mode. So sometimes when I'm working on something like, let's say, surfing the web, I don't like to have any other distractions. So when I do that, I tend to put my web browser into full screen mode, which you can do just by quickly clicking and releasing the green button here at the top of any app. Now, if I wanted to navigate back to my desktop, this is where those gestures on the trackpad come into play. So at this point, I would swipe with 3 fingers left to right to navigate back to my desktop. Alternatively, sometimes I like to have apps run in split screen mode, where I have one app on one side of the screen and another on the reverse. For me, I have found that the Mail program and either the Messages app or the Calendar app pair very well together. In order to make your apps run in split screen mode, just make sure they are both open and then just hover your cursor over the green button, and that will reveal these options. So at this point, I'll put this app into split screen mode, and then I'll just click over here on the Calendar app. Now that I have these 2 apps running side by side, I can grab this bar in the center of the screen and stretch it so that one app has more space than the other. Hotkeys make certain types of operations a little bit easier. The most popular is probably copy and paste. For those of you who are coming to the Mac from the PC world, you've always used the Windows or Control key. But on the Mac, we usually use the Command key. So many of the hotkeys that you may have learned on your PC are actually very similar on the Mac. And rather than spend extra time going over all of those hotkeys, instead, I invite you to download my free PDF guide, which lists many of the most popular hotkey combinations. Another topic I always like to cover when teaching this class is how to tell your Mac that you want to do something to more than one file. To demonstrate this, I'm going to launch the Photos app. Let's say for this example, I want to email a bunch of photos to a friend of mine. Rather than sending one photo at a time, it will be a lot easier to just include all of them in one message. If the items that you want to select are not consecutive, all you need to do is hold down the Command key and individually click the ones that you want to highlight. Alternatively, if the items that you want to select are in a row, it's just like it is on a PC. All you need to do is click on the first item, then hold the Shift key down on your keyboard, and then finally click the last. Now, if I want to email these out, all I need to do is click the Share button, an icon that you definitely want to familiarize yourself with, and then from here, I can share it to email. Another handy trick that I wanted to cover in this class is how to use your iPhone or iPad as a photo or document scanner. Now, this is a fairly new feature, and provided your devices are up to date, it's actually very easy to use. All you need to do is secondary click wherever you want the file to go. So for example, I could do it here on the desktop, or another popular option is to do this while composing an email. And as you can see here, it gives me my options to snap a photo of either a document or just take a standard photo. And when I click this option, it now automatically launches the camera app on my iPhone. For now, I'll just take a photo of a book I just finished, And there, just like that, the file appears on my desktop. Pretty cool, huh? There are a few features that I wanted to point out here at the top right of your desktop. Let's start with Notification Center. Clicking this icon will reveal Notification Center on the right-hand side of your screen. There are two tabs at the top. One is called Today, and the other contains all of the notifications themselves. One really important thing to know about Notification Center is that if you scroll down from here, you can reveal two additional features. This is the shortcut to manually enable or disable night shift mode, and we also have an option to turn on or off Do Not Disturb mode. When enabled, you won't receive any alerts or notifications. In fact, if you look at the icon for Notification Center, you'll see that when I enable it, it grays out. One more thing to know about Do Not Disturb mode: if you want your computer to automatically go into this mode during certain hours, you can just click on the gear icon here at the bottom right, and that will take you to the preferences. If you look here at the bottom of Notification Center, you'll also see an Edit button. Clicking that will open up the available apps that you can place into Notification Center. For me, I really like having my calendar, reminders, the weather, stock market, and I like to have a world clock for each of the different time zones that I commonly communicate with. The next icon that you'll see here at the very top is Siri. You can use Siri to do a lot of different things like send text messages, emails, launch applications, find out information about local businesses, movie showtimes, and a lot more. Now, whether or not Siri understands you, well, that's a different story. Spotlight is a feature that allows you to search for files on your Mac, websites that you've recently visited, sports scores, weather conditions, etc. Another feature I wanted to give a shout out to is a very simple yet highly useful feature called Stacks. And this is especially good for any of you out there who have cluttered desktops. To enable this feature, just secondary click on your desktop and click here where it says Use Stacks. And when you enable it, it will automatically organize your files by type. So for example, I have a bunch of documents that are now all grouped together. And when I click here, it can expand them, and then when I'm done, I can click it again to close it. See, just like that, clean desktop. I'd like to end this class by offering you a few additional resources. If there are other apps that you want to learn how to better use on your Mac, I want to show you a little trick. If you go to my main YouTube channel, which is of course youtube.com/TechTalkAmerica, and then if you click on this little spyglass icon, you can type in whatever topic you want, and odds are, after 500 tutorial videos, you'll probably find something. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize that everyone out there learns differently. And if you are the kind of person who might benefit more from a one-on-one private lesson, please know that is one of the things that I do, and you can book a session with me right through my website at techtalkamerica.com. Finally, if this video helped you, you can help other people find it by clicking that little like button, leave me a comment down below, and if you haven't already done so, you can also, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure you hit that little bell icon so you receive notifications when I come out with new classes. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This is David A. Cox with Tech Talk America. Class dismissed.